On the bustling streets of Manila, a barefoot boy strummed a battered guitar, singing for coins to feed himself. Few noticed him, until one day, a video of his soulful rendition of Hotel California went viral. That video would carry him far beyond the streets, onto the world's biggest stage, America's Got Talent. The streets of Manila were his home. At night, the boy curled up on a cardboard mat, listening to the hum of tricycles and the shuffle of hurried feet. By day, he carried with him an old, battered guitar, its strings worn thin, its wood scratched from years of use. It wasn't much, but to him, it was everything. It was his companion, his voice, his only chance to be heard. Each morning, as the sun rose, he would find a corner near the marketplace or the bus terminal. With bare feet dusty from the pavement, he'd sit quietly, strum a chord, and begin to sing. His voice, soft at first, then soaring with emotion, cut through the noise of the city. Some people hurried past, too busy to notice. Others slowed, drawn to the sound of a child singing words far older than himself. On good days, coins clinked into the empty tin at his feet. On bad days, he went to bed hungry, his stomach aching, his heart heavy. Yet no matter the outcome, he sang. Because singing wasn't just survival, it was hope. Every note carried the memory of his mother, who once sang lullabies before life's hardships tore them apart. Music was his way of keeping her voice alive. One afternoon, as he played the familiar chords of Hotel California, a tourist stopped. Unlike most, this man didn't just pass by. He listened, really listened, watching the boy's small fingers move over the strings with surprising skill, hearing the raw ache in his voice. The song wasn't perfect, but it was powerful. It carried the weight of struggle, yet also the spark of something greater. The tourist pulled out his phone and began to record. The boy didn't notice at first, he was lost in the music, his eyes closed as though the song carried him somewhere far from the streets. When the final chord faded, the man dropped a generous bill into the tin, smiled warmly, and walked away. The boy thought little of it. Just another kind stranger. But that video, the recording of a barefoot child singing for survival, would travel across oceans. It would be shared, liked, and celebrated by millions. And soon, it would take him from the noisy streets of Manila to the blinding lights of the world's biggest stage, America's Got Talent. The boy had never been on an airplane before, let alone traveled across the ocean. Everything about America felt overwhelming, the towering buildings, the endless lights, the sea of strangers speaking words he barely understood. But nothing compared to the moment he walked through the backstage doors of America's Got Talent. The stage loomed before him, vast and glittering, unlike anything he could have imagined while singing on the sidewalks of Manila. Spotlights traced across the crowd, illuminating thousands of faces waiting expectantly. His heart pounded. For years, his audience had been hurried passers-by, sometimes generous, sometimes indifferent. Now, millions would be watching, not just here in the theater, but across television screens around the world. His small hands gripped the neck of his battered guitar, the same one he had carried through every hardship. To others, it looked worn and out of place in such a grand setting, but to him, it was a lifeline. He whispered a silent prayer, not for fame, not for riches, but simply for the courage to sing as he always had. When the announcer called his name, he stepped forward into the spotlight. The judges' table gleamed under the lights. Simon Cowell leaned forward, eyes narrowed with curiosity. The boy could feel the weight of skepticism in the room. After all, he was just a child, homeless until recently, standing in front of the most famous judges in the world. One of them asked gently, "Why did you come here today?" His voice trembled as he answered, "To sing, and to make people feel my song." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was honest. The host gave him an encouraging nod, and suddenly the room grew still. The crowd quieted, the lights dimmed, and all that remained was the boy, the guitar, and a single microphone. His throat tightened. For a brief second, he thought of running, of hiding back where no one could laugh or doubt him. But then he remembered the streets, the nights of hunger, the kindness of strangers who had stopped to listen. He took a deep breath, strummed the first familiar chord of Hotel California, and let his voice carry into the silence. At that moment, he wasn't just a homeless boy anymore. He was a singer, standing on the biggest stage of his life, ready to be heard. The first notes of Hotel California rang out softly, trembling at first, then steadier with each strum. The guitar may have been old and scratched, but in the boy's hands, it sang with a haunting beauty. His voice followed, fragile yet powerful, carrying the weight of his young life. At first, the audience shifted in their seats, unsure what to expect. But as the boy's voice soared, something remarkable happened. The vast theater grew silent. Even the smallest whisper faded as his words wrapped around every heart in the room. He didn't just sing the lyrics, he lived them. His voice carried echoes of nights spent beneath broken rooftops, of hunger, of loneliness, but also of hope. Each note seemed to rise above the pain, reaching for something greater, something eternal. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, eyebrows lifting. He had seen countless performers on that stage, some polished, some raw, but there was something different here. This boy wasn't just performing, he was opening his soul. A woman in the audience wiped tears from her eyes. A father squeezed his daughter's hand. People who had come expecting entertainment now found themselves confronted with something deeper, the undeniable truth that music, even from the most unexpected place, could heal. As the song swelled into its chorus, the boy closed his eyes, letting the melody carry him. For a moment, he forgot the stage, the cameras, the judges. He was back on the streets, playing for strangers who sometimes dropped coins, sometimes stopped to listen, sometimes just passed by. But now, instead of rushing footsteps, there was silence, and then, applause breaking through mid-song, as if the crowd couldn't hold back their awe. By the final verse, the boy's voice cracked, not from weakness, but from emotion too big for his small body to contain. The last note hung in the air, trembling, aching, beautiful. When it faded, there was no pause. The audience erupted into thunderous applause, people leaping to their feet in a standing ovation. The boy stood frozen, clutching his guitar, overwhelmed. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. The world had seen him, and listened. The applause thundered on, wave after wave crashing over the boy until he could barely breathe. He clutched his guitar to his chest, eyes wide, his small frame trembling under the weight of so many cheers. He had dreamed of being heard, but never, never, like this. The judges leaned forward. One smiled warmly, another shook their head in disbelief. But it was Simon Cowell's silence that filled the room with tension. Known for his sharp critiques and unflinching honesty, he sat with his hands folded, studying the boy as though measuring every ounce of truth he had just witnessed. Finally, Simon leaned toward the microphone. "I don't think you realize what you just did," he said, his voice steady but charged with emotion. The boy's breath caught. Simon continued, "I've heard this song 1,000 times in my life, but never like that. You didn't just sing, you told us your story. And it was unforgettable." The crowd roared again, but Simon wasn't finished. He pushed back his chair and stood, something he rarely did. The boy's heart pounded faster with every step Simon took toward the golden buzzer. The other judges smiled knowingly, their faces glowing with anticipation. Simon turned back to the boy. "You've come from nothing, yet you've given us everything tonight. And sometimes, the world needs to stop and listen to a voice like yours." With those words, he pressed the golden buzzer. The theater exploded. Golden confetti burst from the ceiling like a storm of stars, raining down over the boy. He dropped his guitar in shock, his hands flying to his mouth as tears streamed down his face. The crowd rose again, cheering louder than before, some chanting his name. The boy fell to his knees in the middle of the stage, overwhelmed. For years he had sung in the shadows, unseen, unheard. Now, he stood bathed in golden light, a symbol of hope and resilience. Simon stepped onto the stage, kneeling beside him. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered something only he could hear, "The world will never forget this moment. And neither will I." For the boy, it was no longer just a dream. It was the beginning of a new life. Long after the last pieces of golden confetti were swept away, the boy's life was no longer the same. Overnight, he went from a nameless child singing on the streets of Manila to a symbol of resilience, hope, and the power of dreams. News outlets across the globe replayed his performance, and millions watched in awe as his trembling voice echoed across screens. Back in the Philippines, his old neighbors gathered around a single television in a crowded alleyway, cheering and wiping tears as they saw the boy they once passed every day standing tall on the world stage. Strangers who had once walked by him without a glance now spoke of his courage with pride. He had become a beacon, not just for himself, but for every child who felt invisible. But fame wasn't what changed him most. It was kindness. Messages poured in from people he had never met, offers of help, music scholarships, even letters from other children who said his voice had given them courage to keep going. For the first time, the boy realized his singing wasn't just survival, it was a gift that could touch hearts far beyond his own struggles. Weeks later, when asked what he wanted to do with his newfound success, his answer stunned everyone. He didn't speak of riches or luxury. Instead, he said softly, "I want to help kids like me, kids who don't have a home, but who still have dreams." His voice cracked, but his resolve didn't. And so, his story became more than a performance. It became a movement. He began using his platform to support shelters and programs for homeless children, returning to the very streets where he once played his guitar, this time to give back. The boy who once sang only to survive now sang to inspire, to heal, to remind the world that greatness can rise from the humblest of places. His journey wasn't about winning a show or impressing judges. It was about proving that even in the darkest corners of life, a single voice, brave enough to sing, can spark light for millions. And as the world remembered his song, they also remembered the truth it carried: every child deserves to be seen, to be heard, and to be believed in.